But Detroit, unlike the Jets, I'm sorry, Jared, have scored on 73.4% of their red zone possessions, which is first in the NFL. You take a breath. Do you think they can cover the spread, Tank, this week?
Yo, like I'm so anxious to hear Jared's viewpoint on this line because I'm like, yo, like I get it. Like I totally get it because the Detroit Lions have been playing phenomenal ball, and like I'm one of the hugest
Yeah.
like Detroit fans just watching them win because we're talking about how people were trying to hate on Jared Goff early in the season, trying to say like, oh, the Spider-Man meme
Yeah.
was like Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff pointing at each other because they're the same cat. Like, no, Jared Goff isn't that cat. Like he's actually trying to protect the ball this year. And that damn Detroit Lions offense is just unbelievable. Like Jamal Williams, who everyone expected to take a backseat to DeAndre Swift, has been balling. He's one of the
Mm-hmm.
leaders in rushing touchdowns this season. Amon-Ra St. Brown is like one of the better wide receivers in the league, not just the division, but in the damn league. And now they're getting even more dogs back. Like Jameson Williams only played a handful of snaps, but once this dude is like back and healthy and they unleash that monster on the opposing defense, it's like, oh my God. And so
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's like really like Vegas just really said that, all right, we have this Lions team going up against a 9-2 Viking squad, and we're just going to say that since they're playing at home and they've been competitive against a Buffalo Bills team, and then they win the game last week, like we just gonna go ahead and say that they should win the game against a 9-2, like in their division. Like that to me is mind blowing because it's almost like a college football thing where you have like a lower ranked team. That's just like saying like, hey, like
Yeah.
TCU, like they've won a bunch of games this year, and so hey, we gonna just say that even though like they lost last week, we're gonna just go ahead and say that they're the number one team in the country over Georgia, who won the championship last year, and that's leading all of college football this year. I mean, it seems like Jared has always said that Vegas is always late to the game to try to adjust things, like the Atlanta Falcons, how they were like had this really great winning percentage against the spread because Vegas was late to adjust. And so now this game against the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings, this is when you want to adjust and say that the Lions are going to be favored against a 9-2 team. Like this is just mind blowing to me. So I don't know how in the hell to gauge this one. Like the only thing I can say is that I wish the total was lower so I can bet the over because I feel like when you have a Minnesota Vikings team that gives up the amount of points that they do, that I have no qualms about the Detroit Lions scoring points. And I feel like the Vikings are gonna come in motivated saying, like, really? Like we can almost like lock up the division and you have us as like dogs this week against the Detroit Lions. So I feel like they're going to come in motivated on the opposite side of the ball. So I don't know which way to bet this game. I'm just interested to hear how in the hell the Vikings are damn dogs in this game.
Yeah, I will say the Vikings are 0-4, Jared, against the spread in the last four meetings between these two teams. But also, that had the Lions as like heavy underdogs in most of those games that the Vikings couldn't cover the spread. Do you think that the Lions can cover the 2.5 points here, win by a field goal or more?
Absolutely. All right, where do we even
Let's
begin
go.
here, right? Like, where do we even start? Let's start with the
Yeah.
last game that these two teams played, which was a game dominated by the Lions until the final 8 minutes of the fourth quarter when
We were
Minnesota
all on the
scored
line.
two. Yeah, and they covered by a half a point. And the Lions at one point in the middle, late third quarter had like a 94% win probability. I mean, that game was done and dusted. And then the Lions just collapsed and the Vikings, I don't know what it's like they're sleeping with angels this year. So if you flipped every one score game the Vikings played in this season and you said it was the opposite, like if all the coin flip games they've played in, if you flip the results, they'd be 1-11 this year. I mean it's that easy, right? Like they are literally one bounce of the ball away from losing. Out of their 10 wins, 9 of them out the window, besides their first game against Green Bay, which was a very decisive win. All of their other 9 wins have been coin flip games where they've had to overcome deficits or they've had balls bounce their way or the Jets go 1 for 6 in the red zone and they can't. I mean, the Jets outgained the Vikings in that game by over 200 yards. They were a plus 1.5 net yards per play. I mean, it was just moving the ball up and down the field at ease and then just pissing down their leg in the red zone every single time.
Yeah.
And I think the Lions have a little bit more stable of a running game. And really, the reason why this number is what it is the DVOA, which has kind of become like an industry standard line setting metric, one of the big metrics that Vegas uses to kind of set these lines every week. The Vikings have the lowest DVOA of any 10-2 team in the history of the statistic. It's never been recorded lower. So they're just a very average football team that has a couple of really nice players on offense, but metrically down to down, they are a very average football team. Meanwhile, the Lions are 5-0 against the spread in their last 5. They're covering by over 12 points in that spread. Lauren mentioned the only loss was to the Bills by a field goal on Thanksgiving, and then the Bills followed that up with a shellacking of the Patriots. So the Bills clearly are still the Bills, right? And the Lions were toe for toe in that game. During that stretch, this 5-0 ATS stretch, the Lions are 4th in efficiency on offense, 15th on defense. And I know that doesn't sound great, but in weeks 1 through 8, to put it in perspective, the Lions were 32nd in defense. So they have moved up the standings dramatically, both offensively, where they were kind of in the 20 range, and defensively, where they've gone from last to now middle of the pack. And you have to ask yourself, all right, well, why? What's the improvement? Like what is happening that is making this Lions team playing better? I give a lot of credit to Ben Johnson. If you recall, he took over the passing game for Anthony Lynn mid-season last year. And Anthony Lynn got shoved out of town, obviously, right? And now with Ben Johnson, kind of assuming full offensive coordinator duties, you've seen Jared Goff become much more comfortable. This is also one of the best offensive lines in football, top 10 PFF grade all season, top 5 in run block win rate. The defense still struggles to get pressure, but Aiden Hutchinson has emerged as one of the better young players in this league. Last year's third-round pick, Alim McNeil, starting to play better. 13 of his 23 pressures have come in the last 3 weeks, so they're getting a little bit more pressure on the edge, marginally speaking. The secondary is what's really, I think, improved. All 3 safeties are grading out above average. Jeff Okudah is starting to get healthy. Aaron Glenn, as defensive coordinator, is starting to get comfortable with some of his blitzing schemes and cover schemes. And overall, Detroit has faced the 3rd toughest schedule of offenses. So it's fair to say that they are going to improve defensively down the stretch, facing a somewhat easier schedule. They're first in, like we talked about the red zone all day. Detroit is the number 1 red zone scoring offense in the NFL at 73% with their touchdown percentage. They're 84% over the last 3 weeks. There's just so many things to like about this Lions team, and there's so many things to not like about this Vikings team. I'm not surprised at all this line opened where it is and has moved towards Detroit. And I wouldn't be shocked if they blow them out by 2 or 3 scores. I would not be shocked in the slightest if this game's like 40-17 Detroit. Not shocked at all.